such a shame that we're losing Archie with us. I'm just going to introduce, however, two wonderful people that we have with us, Katie and Leo Capella. Katie is an autistic activist, mother and campaigner. She's co-founder and current chairperson of the autism rights group Highland, ARG. I think that's how you say it, is that right? Yeah. A collective advocacy, lobbying and campaigning group of autistic adults. And she's come all the way down from Scotland to be with us tonight. Katie sits in the National ASD Reference Group, a Scottish Government advisory group responsible for implementation of the autism strategy, as well as being involved in loads of other organisations in Scotland. Her other passions include campaigning for easy access for everyone, to independent advocacy, improved access to community services, including healthcare, and an end to segregated education. So that's Katie. Is an expert advisor for Ambitious About Autism, who last year spoke at the Ambitious About Autism Pairs lecture in 2012. He was a clerical assistant in the Department of Environmental Health at Uttlesford District Council for 2.5 years, performing disability duties. He then received his Bachelor of Arts in Politics at the University of Essex and a Master's in International Security from the University of Warwick. He became a student union representative at the University of Essex, serving on the National Union of Students Disabled Students Committee for 1 year and getting the Committee Member of the Year Award for 2008. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome around the age of 5. Thank you very much. So the next half an hour, essentially, we're going to do a bit of Q&A. But what we want it to be is a genuine discussion. So you can discuss also amongst yourselves as well. We have 2 people with mics, roving mics. So we'll take questions. So if you just put your hand up if you want to ask questions. While you're all thinking of the kind of questions that you want to ask, I'm going to kick off with one, because I know this film's raised lots of interesting issues. But I thought I'd ask a question and let Katie and Leo answer it, and then open it to the floor. So I thought the film obviously very much focuses on one particularly influential organisation in the US, Autism Speaks. And I just wanted to get your sense, Katie and Leo, about the extent to which you think the issues that the film raises is relevant for a UK context.
Okay. Oh God. Right. I think the issues are around, but thankfully it's not the same situation. I think firstly you've got to understand the UK has had a position that it has been very strong on disability rights, despite the current, despite the cuts, the abolition of the independent living fund and the bedroom tax or spare room subsidy, however you look at it, terminology. Right, but I think those issues are on the fringes. I mean, the whole thing about, I'm not sure of the, we've had the Paralympics, and although that did give a huge boost to a lot of debates that are around it, we are still seeing things like Winterbourne View. We are still seeing problems with education, and even though we are getting the new SEN law, which means that support has gone from a cliff edge where at 16 you drop off to more of a ski jump, where now support leaves if you have got up to 25. So I think the issues are there, but there's a lot more goodwill, and there's a lot more willingness from the British organisations who are interested in research, like Autistica, to be willing to engage. However, I do think the challenge is, in a time in where we've got globalisation on one hand and the economic current, how do we keep up going forward and not going into a climate where groups like Autism Speaks flourish?
Yeah, well, I'd start by saying I think Autism Speaks is closer to home than we think. They're moving into Ireland and paying for research there and working with some Irish organisations, so they are sort of getting quite overtly closer to home. There's also the Light It Up Blue campaign, which is basically an Autism Speaks advert that's quite prevalent across the UK. Even people don't even realise that they're promoting Autism Speaks by doing Light It Up Blue sometimes. And Autistica was actually the UK Autism Speaks until they changed their name. So they sort of do have a foot in the UK, and hopefully it won't get bigger, but I think they're here maybe more veiled, maybe more, I don't know, maybe more covert. Yeah. But the basics, we've still got a lot of the basics wrong. Basic rights, restraint, what some people might call inappropriate restraint, but then there'd be an argument whether restraint is appropriate at all, because, well, no, particularly in the absence of properly trained staff causing problems that they will then restrain people for that really weren't actually the person's problem in the first place. If they hadn't have had the staff, if the staff hadn't been there causing the problem, then the restraint wouldn't have happened, and getting into a cycle of restraint. And access to education. There isn't equal access to education for autistic people in this country. There isn't equal access to healthcare for autistic people in this country. And a lot of autistic people don't even have the right to choose who enter their own homes. They don't get to choose the support staff. If they don't like a certain member of staff, that can end up being called change behaviour rather than actually being seen as a choice. So the basic human rights are being denied autistic people in this country. So until you start to even chip away at that, or until a lot of people aren't really recognising that, then the organisations or the banners that are being used to promote that and aren't tackling that, it doesn't really matter what the organisation's called if nothing's being done, if that makes sense.
May I respond to Katie? I think Autism Speaks have been always the sort of enemy at the gates, if you will. They've always been around, but it's almost with organisations like Autistic and which was Autism Speaks UK. They have been slightly more prepared to cross the gap. However, just today there was an article in the Daily Mirror, which can be viewed online, about Declan Kidd. I think it's a singer from Boyzone. I think it's Declan Kidney who said who was talking about his 14-year-old autistic daughter. I have huge amount of respect for parents. I mean, I've got a huge amount of praise for my own family, but he came close to the line when he used the term epidemic in one of his remarks. I'd urge you to look at it to say, this is something, as much as I respect the guy, we've got to avoid.
On that note, questions?
Hi, my name's Simone Aspis, disabled activist, and also I'm a campaigns and policy coordinator for the Alliance for Inclusive Education, so we'll be very happy to talk to you afterwards. I'll tell you what I'm really interested about the film was the strong links the autistic rights movement has with the disabled people's movement and with the lesbian and gay rights movement. So I was quite interested in why particularly that the autistic movement had identified themselves strongly with the gay rights movement, possibly, maybe, alternative to the black people's civil rights movement. So I was really interested in that. I'm building on what comments have been said already. Unfortunately, I don't think I can agree with you in terms of the children and families reforms, which you're talking about, Leo. We've been fighting very strongly because actually the current reforms we've got, the Children and Families Act, is going to undermine disabled learners' rights to access mainstream education, and we're in the processes of trying to do damage limitation at our organisation. I do think that in terms of disabled people's rights to life, particularly people with autism, I think that is really undermined. Certainly a couple of years ago, the human fertilisation and low fertilisation body there was a big debate about whether, there should be, whether preference should be given to girls as opposed to boys in order to avoid babies being born with autism. And therefore, when you're at that level, actually, people with autism don't even have the bloody right to life in this country. And I was just so impressed by the whole video, the linking between the Not Dead Yet campaign, because in the UK, the Not Dead Yet campaign only wants to deal with people with assisted suicide, not the right to life at the beginning, which I've been very much been part of trying to push the Not Dead Yet campaign to be doing. So yeah, it sounds to me you've kind of been putting, and to have inclusive education embedded in that video, it was just like music to my ears. Anyway, so I just want to kind of I think it was more observations, but would like to particularly want to know about that link with the why the gay rights movement. Okay, brilliant.
I mean, I think I'm not the best person to answer this, but I think some people will go to the gay rights movement because it is the idea of disability. I think there's an essay that may be lost to the sands of the internet called "Why Disability Rights Are Not Enough." Now, I come from a disability rights background, so that is how to put it. I see myself as part of a wider federation, if you like, of disabled people who, despite disagreements in certain areas, work effectively together for disability rights. However, there is almost, I mean, KB will probably have more of an answer on this, but I think the key argument would be, it is the idea that we want to have something that recognises us as a different group. It possibly call it at parallels to the population rather than below the population.
I don't really have a definitive answer. I mean, there are lots of parallels probably between the gay rights movement and the autistic rights movement. I mean, one is that we're born as a minority but don't obviously look like a minority, I suppose, and that anyone can be gay or anyone can be autistic. It's cross-cultural. But I don't really know.
Just commenting on what's been said thus far. Last night it wasn't this film or a film like it that was shown on the eve of World Autism Awareness Day, but the Youth for Earth Horizon programme, which I have a lot of issues with. One being the lack of, there's a bit of autistic voice in it, but only those that seem to fit in with the narrative of the programme. No criticisms whatsoever, nothing on the censor issues, all of that. And it was the expert voice talking about us with very little input from us. So if that's anything to go by, are we really doing any better?
Does anyone want to respond?
Sorry.
Can I just quickly say that I'd agree with that? So often, from my experience, what will happen is maybe if we're getting somewhere with a local council, if we're getting somewhere on some sort of meeting that I'm sitting on, sometimes they'll go and find a friendly autistic to wheel in who disagrees with us. Even though we're a big group, they'll find one person and point to them because they bring an opposing view even as an individual, and that's kind of what you're saying, that they can people can go and find people who agree with them if they want to.
I didn't manage, unfortunately, I didn't manage to see the programme because of personal reason, but I think there is, what I would say is there is room for debate, there isn't room for monologue. If what happened in that film was one professional talking, maybe talking with voices with a few token counterpoints, that's not how it should be done. I mean, frankly, I'm all for debate. I want to see autistic people debating autistic issues, whether if it's over the whole assisted debate or the whole or how do we get employment. But the fact is, we don't have a room for monologue. And I meant being talked down to on this.
Yeah, I'm Caroline Hurst. I am an autistic adult who I also am training about autism from that perspective, but I would completely agree about that programme yesterday. It was called, I think, An Autistic Life or something. Living with Autism. Well, it was Living with Uta Fripp is what it was. And her opinions about autism. And, you know, let's be condescending to for an hour. It was not enjoyable, and it was markedly, in my opinion, inaccurate, because they just used complete statistics about the percentage of adult autistics who do X, Y, or Z, when we all know, and it's acknowledged, that the majority of adult autistics are undiagnosed. So those statistics were sort of false. And I just wanted to say, in terms of the parallel with the gay movement, is I think there are major parallels, which I think that woman on the film made very well, in that it's a population who has been pathologised. So, you know, homosexuality used to be in the DSM, just as autism is in the DSM. But yesterday on this programme we had Baron Cohen saying that he would withhold diagnosis of autism from somebody who is managing all right. Okay, so it's not a medical condition that exists as a condition, it's something that a doctor has a right to decide if you're functioning socially okay. So it's a position in society. And if we look at the position of gay people and how that's changed over my lifetime, for instance, where it was illegal to actually practice as a gay person your sexuality, and now it's illegal to discriminate against people on the basis of their sexuality. And I think what we need in terms of autism is really a cultural change of that magnitude. Yeah.
Any questions from John? Somebody go in here in front.
As a parent of a severely autistic child, I felt very sad about that film. I felt that the Asperger's community, I felt very much in sympathy with them. And in America they don't talk about Asperger's and autism, they run it into one. And I felt it was really sad that they were pitted against the parental community. I don't know a lot about Autism Speaks, but I'm somebody who actually donates to Autistica because I would like to see, inverted commas, improved care, improved diagnosis of perhaps things that cause autism. And if there was a pill tomorrow that was available for my son, I love him passionately, but I would give it to them if it cured, in inverted commas, his autism. But the most truest depiction on television I've ever seen of autism was a Louis Theroux film, where there was a child who was being restrained and his mother was sitting on him. And it was horrible, but I've been there. I know what it's like. And it's really, really sad. I mean, one of those children there described himself as a mathematician, a musician and a scholar. I can't ask my son what it feels like to be autistic. I can't ask him what he wants in his life. I have to interpret, and anything that can actually work towards giving him a better quality of life, you know, I would support. And I think it's wrong to pit the research community against those people who are striving for improved conditions for people in this country who've got autism. I know Autistica, for example, is actually doing a big piece of work shortly on autistic adults. They're trying to look at there are lots of people now who are in their 50s, whose parents may be dying, who've looked after them for years. You know, who's looking after them? Where are they? You know, these organisations are also doing that work. And so I think that rather than saying, well, actually, they've got the resources and we want their resources, we should actually, you know, saying to government, we want more resources.
Look, I have to say this. I can see the whole fear, but firstly, I'm trying to remember a few years, in about 2008, I went to the first peers lecture, the Treehouse lecture as it was then called, and Bob Wright gave a lecture. One of the things that stuck out for me was his argument was, you advocate for your people, I'll advocate for mine. That's something that just creates what's called the tragedy of the commons. And that's basically everyone tries to compete for the same thing, and the result is total destruction. And I mean, I think KB will probably elaborate more on the communication, but I can say also there are people who are non-verbal, who do communicate. My question is, how do we build some kind of bridge? I mean, there are going to be issues that we disagree on. I mean, but the thing is that I can acknowledge that there are parents who do have the more, trying to use the right term here, and it's just more non-verbal, maybe have these difficulties, these challenges. How do we find ways to allow these to get, where possible, for people to exercise their self-determination? Because I think that has to be a starting point at whatever point, where possible. Because if we can work together, then, and we don't have to go down the road of the whole autism speaks versus ASAN, I think we could create a brighter future. But the question I have to ask is, what would you be willing to concede on that, on your side of the line? Because it is if some kind, I mean, and there is the 1 in 100 report, which there was research asking that people with autism did want actual scientific research into these things, but I don't think the answer will come from as much as smoking in pills.
Yeah, I want to say that, well, I don't, the autistic community, well, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but from people that I know, really, really don't want to divide. We don't want to be pitted against parents. And when we talk about activism, we're talking about everyone. We're not talking about a certain type of autistic person. It is everyone. Self-advocacy is everyone. But that's about educating people, support people, and people around autistic people, however they communicate. I mean, encouraging and ensuring that everyone has the right to communicate and the right to find a way to communicate with the people around them that is accepted, and that they're not written off, or they're not put into a particular box, or they're not labelled as being obstructive or having challenging behaviour. Or it's something where we all need to go together. We do all need to go together. There's no good having a divided community. Well, there's parents over here and we're over there, and lots of us are parents too. Lots of us are parents. And for me, it's something that seems so good. Perhaps taken from the gay community, maybe the PFAG idea, because that just looks so great to have. I know so many great parents who really, really support autistic advocacy, but they do so in a supportive way. They don't feel they have to push people out of the way. They go with us. And to have something similar to PFAG in this country, where everyone could join and everyone could be united, would just feel amazing.
And if I may add something, the whole thing is, if we could see you guys joining us in the whole sort of rights debates, then maybe we could maybe join you as we do in the scientific research. It is not necessarily an either or. And let's also say this: the autism. Let me also say this: the autism community is also is not homogeneous. It's not all the same. I know that there will be people both inside and outside this room on the autistic spectrum who will disagree point blank with what KB and I are saying. That's fair enough. That's part of politics, people.
Sorry. No, it wasn't front word, it wasn't there.
Hi. I actually work with autistic teenagers, and my question is I work with ones whose parents aren't with them quite often, and it's sort of got to the point, and I've observed, where the parents don't actually see them perhaps even once in 6 months. And I was wondering, how do you sort of communicate or tell them the importance of actually being there for their child? As they said, I know it is very difficult for autistic parents to actually be there for their children, but how did you actually either convince them to be there, part of their lives more, so they actually have awareness of them? What would you say, really?
That's a massive, well, I don't know, I think that can only really be answered on an individual basis, because there are so many reasons why that situation could arise that I don't know how I'd answer that as one huge question, because it is such a massive question. And I mean, my parents weren't particularly supportive, so I'm probably not, I don't know.
My parents, I can't answer that question either. My parents were supportive of me up to a point. The only thing I could really say is that the people there have their issues, and I think it is not easy, but maybe, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is that whole sort of phases of grief. They seem to be stuck at that point, but that's the best I can do, I'm afraid.
That's fine, thank you.
Just commenting on the previous thing about cure and spending lots of money on it. I'm also on the spectrum and father of a so-called severely affected son. And for all the money that's been spent on genetic research and the rest of it, Liz may be able to comment as well on that, is, to me, it's not a disease or an illness, and therefore there is no cure. And therefore, instead of spending all this money trying to find one, we should support the people here that do exist and their families.
Actually, first I'd like to say I think with Autism Speaks it's just a matter of 20 or 30 years before all the money invested merely proves through research it's a hereditary condition where a subset of humanity that's always been present but has become more prevalent and more obvious due to the success of medicine causing people to have children who otherwise wouldn't have been alive to do that. And the truth is coming out more. So in about 30 years the whole thing will implode on their heads and a lot of people will be trying to sue them because they didn't get cured kids at all. They just got it proved to them. These people were made that way. I notice a lot of people trying to relate on the same sort of basis and frame of reference. I think a lot of the perspective we use is neurotypical on ourselves, positive and negative, cured or healthy. I don't think it's appropriate when you have somebody who has a child who's problematic to the neurotypical parent. They're not relating in neurotypical ways, has energy and have behaviours that are antisocial and not growing in a normal way. That is natural to them, but is not natural to the neurotypical society. So you have Autism Speaks representing the majority who are neurotypical, and there's this relative perversion called autism that is not natural to them. It's like homophobia, something that revolts you. This is not my natural sexuality. There is a deep gut reaction. For me, Autism Speaks represents eugenesis. It represents this deep instinctive need in the greater majority to replicate themselves in something that is not them. And when you have somebody you love and they are in this situation, I'm not saying you're a fascist, I'm saying you love them very much, but you're in a no-win scenario. I keep seeing no-win scenarios in the world of autism. I create them myself. I'm autistic. I love it. I mean, we're all these unique entities that are problematic in a regular frame of reference. And although I don't have a solution to the new language or the new term of perspective to see autism, I think that we could at least start with the idea that the old one is really flawed.
I mean, in some cases, well, I have to agree. The thing about it is the question we've got to ask is the standpoint that we are looking through autism and maybe other conditions that fall under what's called the neurodiversity umbrella. Does it really serve our interest, and does it really, and if not, what way are we looking at it? Because, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a politician. I look at what does it mean. In the whole eugenics thing, I think the thing about Autism Speaks is it comes across, however, and I don't know if there is anyone from Autism Speaks here tonight.
Racial purity!
I think it comes across as majoritarian, and that's much more majority inside of the mainstream with a strong corporate history. That is very much core. And by the way, it has a press office that don't respond to anything, making it worse than Ryanair. But the serious side is that, in a sense, it comes across as this sort. It creates, in a sense, autism doesn't do itself any favours, and it creates in an area where the ghosts of the T4 and euthanasia project of it, with Dalton, who was a British eugenicist, and so on. But it fails to engage it. There is nothing on Autism Speaks' site that details its standpoint. And by the way, Autism Speaks had less of an excuse than British charity. We can't take, I've got to be careful about that. I'm here in personal capacity tonight, but British charities cannot take an overtly political standpoint backing a certain party. In Autism Speaks, it has next to no excuse on these issues. Why isn't it engaging?
Yeah, two more questions.
I'm speaking as a parent of a child who is not autistic but has a learning difficulty, and I was fascinated by the film, absolutely thrilled to hear a self-advocacy from autistic people. But my observation is that there were not featured in that film autistic people with severe learning disabilities, or as far as I could see, learning disabilities. And there are a lot of autistic people with learning disabilities. So that's my observation.
I've been working with some children who've been diagnosed as autistic. It's the first time I've come across some people with autism. So I just say that, so I'm going to try and express something from the outside. I wouldn't worry about organisations like Autism Speaks. It's horrendous by the sound of it. It's just completely shocking. I'm so impressed by that young woman who was so articulate. I wish I was as articulate as she is. I thought she was amazing. And she was the one that ended up going to Obama. And I would suggest building an awareness in our society through yourselves and people like that to articulate what you want to achieve, despite being autistic or because you're autistic, or however you want to see it. Just go for it and don't worry about rights. I wouldn't worry about right. I would express yourselves, and because I think we need to learn more about autism, and we need to learn what the last person said, that there are some people who have an extreme form and are really suffering, and they need our awareness as well. But I don't see it in terms of rights, as it just normal human dignity, and go for it. What amazed me about the people I worked with was that they changed. That's something I didn't realise also was. They changed, neurologically changed. And it makes me wonder deeply about the nature of this diagnosis and what on earth it means, actually. So, go for it and don't worry about rights, basically.
Well, yeah. I can't not worry about rights, really, and I think that's when it comes back to thinking of all autistic people and thinking, you know, people like Connor Sparrow, the guy who died in the bath when he was supposed to be in a safe space in an assessment unit, and he wasn't. Where were his rights? You know, it isn't just about people being denied access to healthcare, people being denied access to education, all kinds of different people being denied access to communication, to means of communication. They can't, you know, the very, very, very basic things that everyone thinks, you know, get up at what time I want and communicate with my family, and, you know, if I'm going to go into a hospital or if I'm going to be put into a place that's supposed to be safe, that I will actually be safe and I will be able to go home to my family again. So it just has to be a rights issue. We don't have basic human rights, so it has to be a rights issue.
I get everybody has rights. I absolutely support it. What I think I'm trying to say is that to present autism to the population would be really helpful, I think, to present it in this positive, articulate way that you do. And the rights part of it is that everybody should have rights. Absolutely everybody. And autistic people are no different. So maybe if, I don't know how, I only saw a little bit of that Uta Fifth thing last night, which was a bit strange, but I mean, the danger is that people see autistic people as on, with its DSM or whatever it is, sort of thing, without knowing about the whole spectrum of what people with autism actually are and can offer. And so maybe you need to make your own documentary series on what you experience autism as and what it offers. And also bringing in the fact that there are some people who really struggle with it because it's affected them so badly.
Can I just make a point about representation? Okay, you did see, representation is my big interest when it comes to autism and disability rights. The thing I will say is that, firstly, we have problems with people with specific learning disabilities. We also have problems with getting in people from black or other ethnic minorities. I joke about it. I call it Nelson's conundrum, where basically if it were a point between autism B, we could say, this is Nelson from The Simpsons. We could say, you're bald for the corporate type. And they could say, take a look at yourself before you judge us. We've got a lot of, no offence to Avi Neiman and some of the others, but we do have that problem. As for learning disability, we've got to do more. That is official. I would say, though, that Rome wasn't built in a decade, and we are trying to go and get stuff, and we are trying to get stuff done, but it will not happen overnight, but I think it can be done.
I think we have one last comment.
Hello, my name is Roger Kelly. I'm autistic. I do autistic stuff under a manner called Thoughtistic, and I just wanted to invite everybody in the room, picking up on the rights thing and a couple of other things that have been said, and equality and such like. So I just would like you to invite you to do a little technique that I encourage businesses and other organisations to do, and that is whenever you are using the word autistic to describe a person, in your language or your writing or your thoughts, substitute, leave it blank and substitute another word. Some time ago in the 60s, we had race issues, 70s we had sex issues, in the 80s and 90s we had LGBT issues, okay? And we're all familiar with the terrible signs, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish and such like. And so if you're ever thinking about autistic people, just make it blank and insert the word black or Jewish or gay, and then read the sentence again. Okay? So, would you like a cure for autism? Or I would like to see a cure for autism. Just in your mind, run that through your mind and say, would I like to see a cure for blackness? Or would I like to see a cure for sexuality? Or would I like to see a cure for gender? Or what have you? And that's the reason why it's more of a cultural issue, more of a minority issue than a disability issue. And I would like to say just one more thing, is that in the street, if you saw somebody being beaten up because they were black, or Islamic or Jewish, or because they were lesbian or gay, the second that you got onto the police, they would be there in a heartbeat, and there would be very, very specific, serious rules for dealing with that discrimination. Now, until our lovely progressive society is at the point where we see equality or discrimination based on disability, and perhaps in this particular environment based on autism, society needs to respond in as serious a way as it does to those other issues. And in fact, it's a protected characteristic, and it comes under equality law, and it has the same weight in legal status has all the other protected characteristics, but in our society, we lag behind it somewhat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Kate and Leo for a fantastic talk. Before you go, I have a few things to say. One is that Ambitious About Autism was sponsoring this event, and they have their Autism Film Club, which I think started today. Tomorrow, it starts tomorrow. There are 3 films showing. You can sign up, and they stream online. So once you sign up, you can see they stream. One film is on starts this week. The next film starts the week after, and so on. If you go to aaa.org.uk, you can sign up. So that's kind of continuing this kind of free film stream. And there are obviously a few people that I actually want to thank for making this such a success. Firstly, to William Davenport for making such a wonderful film and allowing us to screen his film even when he couldn't be here. To Leo and Katie, obviously, for doing a fantastic job as discussants. To Mark Frodsham from Ambitious About Autism for helping me putting this all together. To Metcalfe's Foods for so kindly donating 300 bags of popcorn, which I'm sure you can grab as you leave as well. To all my team at Cray for helping out with all the organising and putting popcorn into cups, etc., etc. Especially to Lorcan Kenny, to Anna Dubnica and to Dan Singer. And most of all, thank you for coming along today. Enjoy the rest of your World Autism Awareness Day or Acceptance Day, and we hope very much to see you again soon. Thank you very much.